Hey guys, it's Libby. I'm back again after another mini hiatus. At the end of my last video, actually maybe it wasn't even the end, but in my last video I mentioned that my dad was in a serious decline and was likely to die, and that I would then be taking a break. I didn't think I wouldn't have time to make another video before that happened, but it did happen. He was having a really tough time. He had dementia, so the whole family is agreed that this is a good thing. And I am now okay. There was a point in time at which I am not okay, and so I didn't make YouTube videos. But I am now doing okay, and so I do want to share the books I have been reading in the past couple of months. And thank you everyone for the lovely comments of support on the last video. Let's not talk about sad things anymore. So in the past like 3 and a bit months, I have read 2 romance novels, 4 like, they're fantasy novels. Anyone reading them would be like, this is fantasy, but I think they are sold in the literary section of like bookstores. So fantasy lit fic crossovers, 6 20th century classics, I think is the appropriate term, and 2 works of nonfiction. Another classic eclectic Libby book wrap-up, reading wrap-up. I remember how to do this. So let's start with the romance novels. In my last video I talked about the first book in the Reckless Rival series. I have now read the other 2 books in the trilogy. There's a couple other novellas that I haven't gotten to, and they're not exactly on the horizon. So I read A Daring Pursuit and A Wicked Game by Kate Bateman. The premise of this series is that in Regency England, or at least the Regency England of Regency romance novels, the Davies and the Montgomerys are a pair of neighboring families who hate each other, and the kids play tricks on each other. But which of course means that the kids spend a lot of time together. So we sometimes get flashbacks to when our main characters were children, but now they are very much adults with very much adult feelings. So in A Daring Pursuit, our hero and heroine are the siblings of the people from the previous book. They are Caris, C-A-R-Y-S, I think I'm saying that right? Caris. And Tristan. I can remember the main characters' names. And the premise of this book is that Caris is very sort of vivacious and bombastic. She dazzles everyone and also scandalizes everyone with her bold fashion choices. And Tristan is very like straight-laced, serious architect who doesn't believe in fun. And they're completely in love with each other. Caris is being blackmailed by a former lover, is a generous term for him, and Tristan sort of gets mixed up in this, and everything goes on from there in a way that I expect you can imagine. I liked this book better than the previous one. It seemed to have a little bit more direction and things were less contrived. It did still have the problem that I think the male character is underwritten. Obviously the main plot of a romance novel is the romance. When are these people going to kiss and tell each other that they love each other? But also both of the female characters in the first 2 books sort of have their own thing going on. Caris has the being blackmailed and then also rescuing a bear. Whereas Tristan doesn't really, he has like a personality, but he doesn't really have a plot arc of his own. So yeah, he is a bit underwritten. But overall, this book is decent and a step up from the previous book in this series, so I gave it a 3.5. That's my personal rating, and I think you guys, this is a library maybe. If you didn't watch my previous video, then you know I am now doing 2 separate ratings. The star rating is my personal opinion, and then I'm going to give a recommendation for you guys, and the 4 categories are drop everything, which is this book is amazing and probably better than anything you're reading right now, so you should just pick it up as soon as possible. Then TBR, which is, I think you should definitely eventually get around to reading this book. It's worth it. Then Library Maybe, or maybe I called it Library I Guess, something like that. A Hesitant Library, which is, if this book sounds like your thing, I think you should eventually get around to it, but don't put forth too much effort or cash in order to obtain it. And then the last one is Pass, which is, I don't think you should read this book. So, Library Maybe for A Daring Pursuit. Then moving on to A Wicked Game, the last book in the trilogy. This is about Harriet, who is a cousin of the main line of Montgomerys. And what's the man's name? Morgan Davies. So Morgan is a captain, I think he's a captain, in the Navy and has been fighting Napoleon. And while he was leading his ships through the West Indies, he used a map with an error on it, and it sent him right into the hands of the French, and he spent several unpleasant weeks in a French prison. So he has come back to England and has vowed revenge on the map maker who ruined his life. That's maybe a little bit extreme. There definitely are romance novels with like graphic, horrible torture. This one doesn't focus on that. It's fairly lighthearted. So imagine Morgan's surprise when the mapmaker is Harriet Montgomery, the woman he has intended to marry when he fell in love with her when they were teenagers. This one, again, a step up. The books in this series get progressively better. So both of our characters have their own plots. I appreciate that Morgan knows from the outset that he wants to marry Harriet. I'm getting a little bit tired of romance novels where the characters, and especially the male characters, are just sort of bewildered by the fact that they have feelings. Like, what? I am in love. How utterly unexpected for a human being. So I appreciated that wasn't in it. It does still have a problem that the problem is that I'm getting tired of seeing this over and over again, and if it were just in one book, that would be okay. But I'm getting tired of romance novels not being stories about people falling in love. I'm a little bit tired of them being stories about people who are already in love getting together. So I think I just need to look for ones where like the main characters don't know each other from the start. I want to see their feelings. I don't want them to already, I want to go on that journey with them. That's why I'm here reading this book about romance. So Wicked Game, I'm giving 4 stars, and I'm saying, because it's the 3rd book in a series, I'm going to say also Library Maybe for you guys. Most romance novelists write books in series, because you tend to get like a 2 to 4 book deal with a publisher. So yeah, they normally get written in series, but generally the author writes their books with the intention of you not having read the previous books in the series. So if you don't care about getting the full picture of these families, you can just jump right into A Wicked Game and it's fine. But if you are really fastidious about doing whole series, then you may have to suffer through the earlier books. Okay, that's all the romance. Next book I read was one of those fantasy lit fic crossovers. I read The Binding by Bridget Collins, or rather, I listened to the audiobook, and this book does have a really excellent narrator. I don't remember his name, but if you are at all amenable to audiobooks, this is an instance where the reader, I think, elevates the experience of the book. So a great thing about taking a hiatus from BookTube is you forget everything you knew about all these books that were on your TBR. So I went into The Binding really not knowing what was going on, and I highly recommend this approach. So I'm not going to say that much about it. The book is about the experience of not understanding what's happening. So you, the reader, should also not understand what's happening. When I started reading it, I didn't even know if it was fantasy or historical fiction. I wasn't sure if magic was going to show up or not. We start off with a young man living on a farm with his parents and sister, and he appears to have recently had some sort of psychotic break. which left him very ill, and he's dealing with the guilt of having not helped his family out on the farm. And then it gets wild. So 4.5 stars to The Binding, and you guys should put this on your TBR. I think you will like it. The other fantasy books I read were the first 3 books in the Wicked Years series by Gregory Maguire. So that's Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West, Son of a Witch, and A Lion Among Men. Does anyone need me to tell them what Wicked is about? I think it has fully saturated the culture at this point. I haven't seen the film. The film looks bad to me. I'm not gonna lie, guys. I'm open to being persuaded, but I don't think I want it. I have seen it on stage. My brief review of the musical is too loud. Oh my, I'm officially an old person now, complaining about the kids listening to their music too loud. I think most, at least Americans, do have some amount of hearing damage. So I think that's part of why the volume is cranked up so loud. I don't have hearing damage, or at least I didn't until I went to see the show, and I had to cover my ears with my hands for the first 15 minutes. It does get better as you get through, or maybe just my ears were damaged. And so it didn't bother me as much. If you go, bring broad spectrum earplugs. I can't recommend that highly enough. My God, I'm surprised that's legal. Anyway, the books. I had already read the first book, Wicked, not quite when it came out, but I think it was when the musical came out and it was very buzzy. Yes, the first time I read the book, I was 12 or 13. I was in middle school, and I did not like it. Apparently, I rated it 2 stars. This time when I read it, I rated it 5 stars. I really enjoyed the experience of reading this book. I think this definitely is a mature story, something you would not know if you've seen the musical. You hear about basically every single bodily fluid, and it's basically never in a sexy way. There's a lot of sex, but very rarely is it sexy. And I think I was just not ready for that as a preteen. So yeah, this time round, I really did enjoy. I'm not going to say I enjoyed all of the bodily fluids, but I was not deterred by all of the bodily fluids. I'm not totally sure I have the words. I found the plot really engaging, and Elphaba, our protagonist, is really a cipher, and you need to get through more than half the book until you sort of start figuring out what her deal is. And with the prologue and, the title of the book, they're really trying to... They're selling you on that, so it's ooh, but who is she, though, and what's her deal? Also, it's about fighting fascism. We could all use that inspiration. It's about fighting fascism and losing, unfortunately. Anyway, the later 2 books, I'm not going to talk about too much because I would have to spoil the first one, but it's Son of a Witch and A Lion Among Men. Lion Among Men is about the Cowardly Lion from the Wizard of Oz movie and book. Son of a Witch I really can't discuss at all without spoiling Wicked, so I'll just say I gave it 4 stars, not as dazzling as Wicked, but still interesting. Lion Among Men, I gave it 3.5 stars. I'm not totally sure why it exists. In any given scene, I could recognize, what is the function of this scene to the broader series. But the book as a whole, I feel like this maybe could have been a short story or, a B-plot that occurred during Son of a Witch. So I'm not sure what its job is. It was interesting. So as I think I said, I gave it 3.5 stars. I have not yet read the 4th book in the series, Out of Oz. It's very long and I'm intimidated. So I reserve the right to revise my opinion once I have read that one. And for you guys, it's not quite drop everything, but Wicked, the first one, definitely needs to be on your TBR if you want to be up to date with the cultural zeitgeist. I think it's that important. If you hate Wicked, you will not like the later ones. So, judge whether you should read those based on your opinion of Wicked. And then, moving on to 20th Century Classics, I started another series. I read the first 3 books and have not gotten further. I started Anne of Green Gables. I think I might be the last person over 12 who has not read these books. I did read the ancestral editions that were given to my mom. Let's see. To lovely Kathleen with love. It does look like lose. Bruce and BB, Christmas 1964. So that's to my mom from her grandparents. My mom also had red hair, so I expect this is very inspiring to her. Again, does anyone need me to tell them what Anne of Green Gables is about? I've read some very popular books. The first book in the series has lost its dust jackets, but the later ones that I have do still have their dust jackets, and oh man. So this is supposedly Anne on the cover of Anne of Avonlea, or is it Avonlea? I'm not sure. So there's Anne with her page boy haircut, her white trench coat, and her blue crew neck sweater. Definitely what Anne was wearing in, 1909 or whenever this is set. And there's also this black and white illustration on the back, which I guess is also Anne, still looking very 60s to me, but clearly a different person than that person on the cover. Is this Diana? I'm utterly bewildered. Anne of the Island, the third book, there's Anne with her heavy mascara and Gilbert in his crew neck sweater or in his V-neck and tie. My God. Clearly, really short-sighted marketing is not a new thing. They've been doing it since the 60s. So, Anne of Green Gables and Anne of Avonlea, I each gave 4 stars. I thought they were delightful. That's the correct term. Anne of the Island, I bumped it down to 3.5. The Anne's sort of whimsy and flights of fancy are getting a little old by book 3, and also at the start of book 1 she's 11, and in book 3 she's like 20. So I'm finding it hard to believe that her personality is in what is basically a full adult. Also, in book 3, this isn't literally true, but roll with me, I feel like there's a new couple falling in love and getting married every chapter. And I admit I could not keep track of all of them. Too many marriages, is my review of Anne of the Island. I do think I will eventually get around to the rest of the series just so I can say that I've read it. But I'm debating whether I want to read L.M. Montgomery's other stories, which are not about Anne, but are in a sort of, I think have a sort of similar lightheartedness. So let me know if you've read the other ones, if you think I would like them. Then I read 4 books. No, I read 3 books that were not, I definitely didn't intend to read them as part of a series, but they do all have very similar topics. So I read 3 books on what one might call daily life and World War II. The first one I have in physical copy, and that is Excellent Women by Barbara Pym. I'm desperately trying to not get you glare, guys, and I'm not sure I'm succeeded. Excellent Women by Barbara Pym. This is about Mildred Lathbury, yes, that's her last name, and it is set in 1950s London, so shortly after the Blitz. And it's mostly about, like, really small, everyday life, domestic stuff. So, like, ought they to get married? Ought they to get divorced? How many people will be at the church jumble sale? And can you do lunch at 1:30 on Wednesday? Very much that sort of thing. But because it's set in post-Blitz London, everyone is just sort of like casually living in a world where most of the buildings are destroyed. Mildred lives in a flat or an apartment which is not supposed to be a flat, so it's a house where the 2 floors have been separated into different housing units because they're running out of housing in London. So she lives on the top floor, and then there's like no door, to the lower floor where a new couple moves in, and that's what sort of kicks things off. And they have to share a bathroom, very awkward. So yeah, I found this interesting. I liked it. A small scale book, but a good book. I gave it 4 stars, and I think you should put it on your TBR. Then I reread A Separate Piece by John Knowles. I read this initially when I was in high school. It is about high school, so I guess they thought we would find it relatable. And I think I have reread it once before as an adult, but I really don't remember how I felt about it then. So A Separate Piece, our main character is named Gene. We initially meet him when he is an adult and has returned to his boarding school that he attended, which is very much based on Phillips Exeter Academy in, I think it's Massachusetts. It's not, the school is not called Phillips Exeter, but it clearly is based on that, and that is where John Knowles went. So this is, I don't think this is semi-autobiographical, because I don't think John Knowles actually did any of these things, but it is inspired by his real-life experiences. So Gene is reminiscing about his time in high school, which was right after the United States had entered World War II. So it's about the summer before his senior year and then his senior year. And the whole, like, attitude that everyone has towards the students is that, like, they're about to go to France or the Pacific and potentially die. So, 1, how much does their education matter? And 2, just let them have fun. Just let them be kids. So this is a really straight-laced boarding school most of the time, but we're seeing it at its most lack. Gene is best friends with his roommate Phineas, goes by Finney. And Finney is sort of the golden boy. He's very good at sports. He's very charismatic. Everyone likes him. He's not that good at academics. Gene is actually arguably better at academics and sort of feels like maybe Finney is pulling him back. Fairly early in the book, Gene does something horrible to Finney, and the rest of the book is about that. Every time I read this, I think I like it more. The thing I got out of it this time was that maybe Gene is not as unreliable of a narrator as I thought he was. I think when I was in 10th grade, I was told, like, this is a book with an unreliable narrator, so read it through that lens. So I just did. But, like, Gene's attitude towards Finney is really interesting, because he likes him and also hates him. And there's John Knowles had said that this is not a queer book. Gene and Finney are not in love. John Knowles is gay, though, so I don't know if he just sort of accidentally wrote a, like, homoerotic element that he wasn't intending, but it's in there, so I'm gonna include it in my thoughts about it. So it may be that Gene finds Finney attractive, but doesn't actually think he's a good person and doesn't really want to be his friend. So previously I had been reading this as, like, Finney is actually a good person, and Gene just has all these really complicated feelings about him. On this reading, I really felt like, oh, Finney actually maybe does suck. I think Gene is frequently right about Finney. So I gave it 4.5 stars, and I think you should put it on your TBR if you haven't already read A Separate Piece. I think for American students, it's not uncommon to read it in high school. And then my last World War II-ish novel was Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh. Another classic. I know it has a much beloved adaptation with Jeremy Irons. I watched the first episode and was like, this is the slowest paced thing I've ever encountered, and then I gave up. I might give it another try now that I've actually read the book. So our main character in this book is Charles. We first meet him during World War II. He's a lieutenant in the army. Don't ask me to remember all these ranks. He and his battalion are setting up camp at a fine English country estate, which is Brideshead. And we learn that he is revisiting Brideshead because he has in fact been here before. We shoot back 15 years to the 1920s when Charles is a student at either Oxford or Cambridge, one of them. And we hear about Charles is the narrator, and I guess sort of he's the lens of the story, but the story's not really about him. It's much more about the Flight family. So we first meet Sebastian Flight, who is a friend that Charles thinks his older cousin and his father might disapprove of him having Sebastian as a friend. Sebastian is kind of a drunk. He's a 19-year-old who walks around with a teddy bear named Aloysius, and he is a Catholic. So this book is very much about being a Catholic in mid-20th century England. Because that causes lots of problems for Sebastian and his family. It starts out about Charles and Sebastian's relationship, again, and then Sebastian meets Charles's sisters, his brother, his mother. His father lives in Italy with his mistress, so that's one of the many complicating factors going on with this family. And I was kind of disappointed that we sort of moved through family members and then discarded them. So we spent so much time with Sebastian at the beginning, and he's a very interesting person. But by the end, like, it's not about Sebastian, and we don't really hear about him at all in the last quarter of the book. So yeah, I would have liked to get maybe a little bit more even pacing. Or just kill Sebastian. If you don't want to put him in the last book, just have him be dead. That's also fine. So Brideshead Revisited, 3.5. I am willing to reread it, and that might improve my opinion now that I sort of know what I'm getting into. And I do think you should put it on your TBR. This is a 20th century classic. You should read it. Okay, moving on to nonfiction. The first one, it's going to be a little controversial that it's in this video. So I listened to the Great Courses lecture series called Great Pharaohs of Ancient Egypt by Brier. Now, I'm aware that many people would not consider this to be a book. Normally, I call something a book if it at some point has had a print publication. And then if it also gets an audiobook, then that's sort of like the audiobook is tied to bookdom by the fact that it's just someone reading a printed page. Yeah, I thought, we're in a new world now, and we might have to adjust that. So I'm totally fine if you want to say, I'm not totally fine if you want to say audiobooks are not books, but I also find that debate boring, so I don't want to get into it. I'm totally fine if you want to say listening to a lecture series is different than reading a book that professor might also potentially write on the same topics. However, I do think it is at least close enough to reading a book that I am going to include it in my booktube wrap-up. So I don't want to engage in the debate about is this reading or is this not. I'm just going to say I am going to include it in these wrap-ups because I think you'll be interested in it. So yes, Great Pharaohs of Ancient Egypt. Brier, the lecturer, is very much from New York. Strong New York accent, strong New York energy. This is definitely like a baby's first ancient Egyptian history. It's focused on the personalities of several of the pharaohs: Ramses, Seti, Cleopatra, Hatshepsut. And so if you already know a lot about ancient Egypt, this is not going to be valuable to you. I did like it. This really helped me understand why it's so hard for me to get Egyptian history into my brain. I feel like I'm pretty good at, I've spent a lot of time studying history, but I've always struggled with ancient Egypt because it's 3,000 years, and it's just so hard for me to hold that in my head. Like, it doesn't, I just feel like everything is getting condensed all of the time in my own mind. And part of that is because we actually know way less about ancient Egypt than you might think. For 3,000 years, we have surprisingly little information about everyday life. Hatshepsut is a famous Egyptian pharaoh, but we actually don't know like when she was reigning and who she was reigning with, and did she get murdered? There's a lot we don't know about Egyptian history. And also, Egyptian art was very conservative. The art styles didn't change hardly at all for those 3,000 years. But yeah, the Egyptians themselves were sort of trying to portray a timelessness and not indicate that time was passing. So that's why it's so hard for me to wrap my brain around, and I learned that in this series. So Great Pharaohs of Ancient Egypt, I'm giving it 4 stars, and I think you guys should put it on your TBR. I downloaded it from Libby through my library. So if it comes from my library, then it's reading. Anyway, last one. Another reread, Our Magnificent Bastard Tongue, The Untold History of English by John McWhorter. I didn't do a full reread of this one. It's 5 chapters, and I skipped chapters 2 and 4 because I didn't need them. Chapters 2 and 4 are more about sociolinguistics. Chapters 1, 3, and 5 are more nuts and bolts, how other languages have affected English, and also Proto-Germanic, which English evolved from. So the 3 chapters that I read were focused on the influence of Celtic languages, of Nordic languages, and of a mystery language which is likely Phoenician on English. I reread this because I teach English as a second language. I am a private tutor, and you can book me on italki, where I have a 5-star rating. I'm very good because I read books like this to make sure I know what I'm talking about. So yeah, I was basically reading this book for work, because I wanted a refresh on the history of English. It's much more about grammatical structures than it is about vocabulary. And it does sound like the lawn maintenance guys have showed up. I'm sorry if you can hear the giant mower in the background. So I guess that's my cue to wrap it up. I gave Our Magnificent Bastard Tongue 5 stars. It's very approachable. It's very, he doesn't use a lot of technical terminology, and he makes a lot of jokes. So yes, 5 stars to Our Magnificent Bastard Tongue, and I think you should put it on your TBR. I had a pretty good 3 months of reading. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you later.